after more than 40 years of working in the film industry, George Lucas still gets as much of a kick out of his movies as his fans do.
The best part of the movies, Star Wars and Indiana Jones too, some of my other movies, is I still love to watch them, just like anybody else does. If they're on TV and I'm halfway, I turn on halfway through, I can't turn it off, even though I've seen it a million times.
It's strange to think that if it hadn't been for his involvement in a disastrous accident, one of the movie industry's most talented contributors would not have made a single film. The teenage speed freak loved fast cars and hoped to be a rally driver. But on the brink of high school graduation, he almost killed himself racing in his hotted-up vehicle. Shaken, he changed course and took liberal arts instead. And he's now worth an estimated $3 billion. In the early 1960s, George was fascinated by obscure experimental films which played with sound and light. Born in 1944 in California, it wasn't until post-school that George found his passion. When his short film won a prize at the 1967-68 National Student Film Festival, he was awarded a scholarship by Warner Brothers. The film he chose to work on was an early feature by Francis Ford Coppola, and this meeting would change his life. The pair co-founded the studio American Zoetrope, a company which would produce a number of acclaimed films. George was not yet 30 when he wrote and directed the film which propelled him into the limelight. American Graffiti was his second feature after THX 1138. Set in the 60s, the film is loosely based on his own experiences as a teenager. And it's a groundbreaking work, innovative in the use of montage storytelling and with a very unique soundtrack. American Graffiti picked up 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director and Best Screenplay, and was selected as one of the best 100 films by the American Film Institute. George acknowledged the debt he owes to this film at its 25th anniversary.
Well, American Graffiti was my first hit movie, so it established me as a director, which was pretty important when you're starting out. Because after I did my first film, it was very hard to get my second film off the ground, which was American Graffiti. But once it was a big hit, then my career as a director was pretty much set.
Years later, with a number of hugely successful films under his belt, he still remembered the thrill his achievement brought him. In an interview in 2002, he revealed his fondest Oscar memory was his first experience with American Graffiti. The director's next film changed the face of science fiction film forever. Star Wars, later renamed Star Wars Episode IV: A New Hope, was the second best project after a planned Flash Gordon adaptation fell through. It proved difficult to raise finance or interest in the project until Alan Ladd Jr. at Fox Studio took a punt on the young director. George brought his experimental film background to his third feature and broke through many special effects barriers to create a highly realistic vision for the future. Although he acknowledged that the practice of tricking the audience is as old as film itself.
The secret to film is that it's an illusion, and it's an illusion that's created at 24 frames a second, and you have the illusion of movement, you have the illusion of space and time, and so right from the very beginning of the film, filmmakers have been using special effects to create the images.
The budget was small, so George agreed to waive his fee and instead took licensing rights. The studio believed they'd got the best of the deal, until the unprecedented demand for Star Wars memorabilia made George a millionaire almost overnight. The film itself has since grossed around $1.3 billion worldwide, putting it in contention for the highest-grossing film of all time. A digitally remastered edition was released in 1997 and made a staggering $37 million on its opening weekend. However, it had been a different story back in 1977.
When I originally did the movie, we ran out of time and money, and we just had to sort of stop the movie and go and release it. Because we were doing a lot of experiments with special effects, we never really were able to finish the special effects because they were all kind of prototypes.
The film has become a fond memory for many of those who now call Hollywood home. Will Smith, at the premiere of I, Robot, commented on how his film choices have been affected by the benchmark movie.
Star Wars is the most amazed I've ever been watching a movie. And I've been my entire career chasing that feeling. I want to make people feel the way Star Wars made me feel in the movie theater.
George wrote and produced 2 more Star Wars films in this early period, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which took the 3 lead characters, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia and Han Solo, through much trial and tribulation to a happy ending. At a Smithsonian exhibition, Star Wars: The Magic of Myth, the creator revealed the inspiration for his work.
It's always a big mystery about why these films are so popular. I think part of it is based on the theme that this Smithsonian exhibit is based around, which is that at the heart of all this is ancient mythology that's been around for thousands of years. Mythology is kind of a psychological archaeology. So you can look into the past and look into the minds of people in the past and see what their emotional life was like and what they cared about. And I just translated that into a modern story.
In the mid-1990s, George returned to Star Wars, this time jumping backwards 20 years into the early lives of his characters. Now that technology had finally caught up with his vision, he was thrilled to be back on the cutting edge.
One of the difficult things I've had, times I've had in the past, is that most of the characters have had to been made out of rubber. They're latex. The best performance I was able to get was out of Yoda, and it was because I had a genius like Frank Oz to be the puppeteer in that. But it's very hard to direct around a large rubber thing that can't move very well.
With 10 or 12 people attached.
Yeah, with 10 or 12 people and a lot of cables attached. It's just technically a very hard thing to do. The big advance, which would compare, I guess, with being able to free spaceships up to be able to pan with them, is that I've got digital characters that kind of actually walk and talk with live action characters and do a performance.
Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was the first in the new trilogy. George wrote, directed and produced the film, effectively immersing himself in his own science fiction world for 6 years. Public expectation was extremely high, with Los Angeles fans queuing up for tickets weeks before the film was due to open. The Phantom Menace was made for $115 million US, and after only 5 days, ticket sales hit the $1 million mark. With so much pre-release hype, there was bound to be some reservations about the actual film.
I went in with mixed feelings because there's all the hype and then there's been the bad reviews. It's just amazing. Visually, it is spectacular. It's really amazing.
Japan had proved to be the largest international market for the first Star Wars trilogy, with the lightsabers and costumes reminiscent of samurai movies. So interest in the new film was huge. Many fans made costumes to wear to the opening.
It's so exciting. These kinds of things only happen very rarely. I plan to have the best of times.
In London, the film was given a royal premiere, with Prince Charles topping the list of stars on the invite. If George had felt stung by some bad reviews, it didn't show.
Well, most of the reviews in the United States, I don't really read the reviews, but I know most of them in the United States were exactly the same as the one on the first film. The first film got trashed, the second film got trashed, the third film got trashed, and basically they're saying the same thing. No story, no characters, all special effects. But the people seem to don't understand that. They seem to think it's emotional and love it and seem to get the story very well.
The second film in the series, Star Wars II: Attack of the Clones, came 2 years later in 2002. The eagerly awaited film opened at Cannes, and George was in a reflective mood, aware that some influential critics continued to slam his work.
In the end, I'm just telling a story, and I'm a storyteller who just tried to do my job the best I can. The fact that people like it is great, but I don't feel that I have to somehow please every single person of the
30 million people to see the movie. There's always people that aren't going to like it. There's always people that are going to like it, that they're going to take exception to certain things in it. I'm hoping that they get a good experience at it and they enjoy it and they, take away something.
At the London premiere, the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra played the score, and Samuel L. Jackson, who played a Jedi Master, got a taste of a very particular crowd.
What I thought it would be. It's pretty out there. You expect Star Wars crowd to be, kind of bonkers.
Ewan McGregor reprised his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi in Clones.
It's very reminiscent of, I think, The Empire Strikes Back in terms of it's quite fast, and the storylines. It's a terribly nice love story in the middle of it, but it's all pretty good. I get to do all this detective work in it, which is nice. Dick Barton. I get my own spaceship. That's cool. That's always good.
George responded to some of the criticisms of the earlier film by explaining that he'd taken fans' requests to heart in the second installment of the series.
I think a lot of the fans for a long time have wanted to see Yoda fight and see that he's this great Jedi that he's always been held up to be. And so I think that's one of the things they'll look at. I think a lot of the fans are waiting to see Anakin grow up, to be a young apprentice, to actually, get to sword fight the way Obi-Wan did in the last movie.
The third and last film in the epic intergalactic series was released in 2005. Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith tied up loose ends and answered many of the questions that had been raised decades earlier in the first film.
I think the main message is how does a good person turn bad and do so unknowingly, how does a republic turn into an empire? And these are just sort of questions that are presented that have a lot of relevance, I think.
George was unsentimental about the end of work that had spanned almost 30 years of his life.
Well, I'm grateful that it's over and relieved that I got it finished. Just like any other movie, just went on a lot longer.
At a private screening in fabulous Monaco, George was able to return to his first love and shake off his responsibilities for a moment.
Well, I love Grand Prix racing. I loved it ever since I was a small boy. I've always dreamed of being part of a team, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity, since this is the exact weekend that the movie opens, to have a car at Monaco. Because I come here anyway.
Even if George had never made another film, the Star Wars saga alone would surely have secured him a lofty place in movie history. However, there is much more to the George Lucas story. He's also the genius behind the hugely successful Indiana Jones franchise. In 1981, he wrote and produced the first film in the series, Raiders of the Lost Ark. With Steven Spielberg directing, Raiders marked the beginning of a historic partnership between the two men.
And I think by the time I did Raiders of the Lost Ark, my next picture, I was humbled. Every single shot was storyboarded. I was 14 days under schedule. And I basically gave George Lucas a lot of credit because George just said, look, you can go over schedule for Columbia and Universal on 841, but you're my friend. You can't go over schedule with basically what is the money I'm responsible for. That's all he had to say.
Raiders was to be the first of 4 films to feature the adventures of whip-wielding archaeologist Indiana Jones, and it romped home with the biggest box office takings of 1981. It received 9 Academy Award nominations, winning 5, and turned actor Harrison Ford into a household name. He's since become synonymous with his on-screen alter ego.
Oh yeah. It's a character that I'm very comfortable with. It's not a problem to get back into character.
The first 3 Indiana movies took over $1 billion each at the box office. But number 4 was a long time coming.
It took a long time to find the right story. I mean, George always had the idea of the crystal skull. That was something George brought to the table at the outset. There were a couple of other possible MacGuffins, but that was the one that stuck. But getting, the focus of the story and who the villains were going to be, that took a lot of time.
The fourth film was released in 2008. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull reunited Harrison with Karen Allen, his co-star in the first film. Many Hollywood actors play outside their age range, and George is the master of digital effects, but he was determined to leave Harrison untouched.
One of the things that we liked about the idea of doing another Indiana Jones is that it couldn't be in the 30s anymore, because Harrison has grown older, and we decided that we didn't want to pretend that he was only 30 years old, and we decided it'd be fun to make a movie with you know, an older hero, because we're all his age.
At the Japanese premiere, Harrison spoke of his joy at climbing back into his Indiana skin after all these years.
It felt great. It felt wonderful to be able to play a character in the kind of film that is of such, that brings so much pleasure to people. And we do all kinds of films, we play all different kinds of characters, and that's a great opportunity. But to be able to make a film that is truly devoted to using all of the capacity of film to bring joy to the audience is a great opportunity and a great honor.
Much of George Lucas's fame and fortune can be attributed to his business activities outside of filmmaking. Fascinated by cutting-edge digital technology, he used the money he made on his first Star Wars films to set up his own studio, Lucasfilm, in Northern California. Within the studio were two special effects branches, Skywalker Sound and Industrial Light and Magic. Just like Hobbit master Peter Jackson and his New Zealand-based studio team, George invests in developing sophisticated technology for his own work, which is then purchased and used by other creative teams on other films. In fact, George and Peter have collaborated frequently over the years.
We have a good relationship, our companies have good relationships, and we've helped him with the sound and visual effects over the years, back when he was just getting started. And we trade people a lot.
Peter's 2005 film King Kong, which transformed New York into its 1930s counterpart, was a great example of what could now be achieved with the technology George had pioneered.
Well, our movie is set in 1933, and I think it would be impossible to shoot in New York in 1933, but we use a lot of very, very sophisticated computer technology, and I think New York looks pretty convincing. I think most people will think we got in a time machine and went back and somehow shot in New York in 33.
Back in the 1990s, the race was on to develop unique technology for the Phantom Menace.
The pod race is an incredible accomplishment, probably due to the fact that virtually everything, the sky, the terrain, the pod, the engines, and the digital characters, the CG alien characters that actually fly the machines, are completely created by a group of artists, because we've reached a whole nother level now.
The multi-award-winning animation group Pixar also started out as Lucasfilms. It began life as Graphics Group, 1/3 of the computer division, and was sold to Steve Jobs in 1986 for $5 million. Compared to many billionaires, George has had an uncomplicated personal life, a very positive thing for a man so dedicated to his work. Married in 1969 to film editor Marsha Lou Griffin, the couple adopted a daughter in 1981. They divorced in 1985. He's adopted a son and another daughter since, and was involved for a long time with singer Linda Ronstadt, before falling for his current fiancée, Melody Hobson. Money and power bring influence, and during the 2008 American elections, George wasn't shy about throwing his substantial support behind Barack Obama.
I'll only say that we have a hero in the making back in the United States today, because we have a new candidate for President of the United States, Barack Obama, who I think for all of us that have dreams and hope, is a hero.
The year before, during a party to celebrate Time magazine's 100 most influential people, he gave his opinion on why then-President George Bush was missing from the list.
Well, I'm not sure he's that influential anymore. I think he's burned out his chance to actually make a difference.
So you ready for change?
Well, I think change will come regardless.
George himself came in at number 4 on Forbes' celebrity list in 2005. The rankings are based on money and influence, and George clearly has plenty of both. Perhaps surprisingly, however, he has yet to win a competitive Oscar for any of his hugely popular films. Recognizing this oversight, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences awarded him the Irving G. Thalberg Award in 1991 for creative producers whose bodies of work reflect a consistently high quality of motion picture production. The following year, he was celebrated in England with a presentation of the Stanley Kubrick Award for Excellence in Film by BAFTA, British Film and Television Academy. He took the opportunity to take stock of the amazing journey that had brought him this far.
I ended up, starting a little company so I could make my movies, and being outside of the Hollywood mainstream, I didn't have anybody to rely on but myself, so I ended up, building an empire that I didn't really set out to do.
In 2005, he was thrilled to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Film Institute.
Well, this is the American Film Institute. It's an important institution, and the people that have won this award or received this award before, are very important people. So to be included in that group is wonderful.
Recognizing his own immense good fortune, George has consistently given a leg up to aspiring filmmakers. Throughout his career, he's worked closely with his alma mater, the University of Southern California. And in 2006, he donated an amazing $175 million to build a new cinema studies complex and equip it with up-to-the-minute technology.
It's actually a great privilege to be able to help the school that helped me so much. When I discovered cinema, I did it here at USC before I was an anthropology major. And once I discovered it, I found my passion. I made a lot of friends. I learned everything I know about movies here. And I have a very, very strong feeling about education in general, and a very specific passion about the value of the cinematic arts.
In 2009, he turned up to the 80th anniversary of his beloved college to watch his old friend and colleague Steven Spielberg being awarded an honorary degree.